Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen. Salatu wassalamu ala Sayyidil Ashrafil Anbiya wal Mursaleen. Sayyidina Muhammadi wa ala alihi wa ashabihi ajma'een. Amma ba'd. Fa'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajeem. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. A couple of weeks ago, when we were looking at how Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam arrived in Medina Munawwara, I mentioned that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam was sitting on his camel, and that this camel was commanded or was ordered by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And firstly, this camel, it went and it stopped on a barren piece of land, and thereafterwards this camel with Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam proceeded forward to the house of Abu Ayyub al-Ansari radiyallahu ta'ala anhu. And at Abu Ayyub radiyallahu anhu's house, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam descended from the camel, and he then went to stay in Abu Ayyub al-Ansari radiyallahu ta'ala anhu's house for the next few days, until Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam built himself an apartment or accommodation. Now, going back to the first part, where Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam was on the camel, and the camel stopped over a barren piece of land. I mentioned a couple of weeks ago that that was a sign and ishara from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that that barren piece of land would be destined to be Masjid al-Nabawi sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And the first project and the first thing Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam did when he arrived in Medina Munawwara was to build a masjid. When we look at it, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam didn't even have his own house or his own accommodation. He was actually living in somebody else's house. He didn't think about, okay, let me build my house first, let me build a house for my wives, and then we'll think about building a masjid. But no, the first thing Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam decided to build in in Medina Munawwara, the first project Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam thought was very, very important for the Muslims and for the Sahabas, was the building of a masjid, which was going to be a place where people would gather and remember Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Now, when Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam did some inquiries, he found out that this barren land where the camel had stood belonged to two orphans whose name was Sahal and Suhail. So Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam approached them, and he said to them that I will buy this piece of land from you. Now, these two orphans, Sahal and Suhail, they said to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam that, O Prophet of Allah, we want to give this land to you for free. We want to give it to you as sadaqah and charity. Because Sahal and Suhail, the two orphans, they saw Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam's sincerity and ikhlas, and they knew that this land they donating to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, something amazing and something brilliant is going to happen. It's not like they were giving it to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam and the Sahabas, and the Sahabas not going to do anything with the land. Nowadays it happens that we give money to various masajids. They promise us we're going to do this, we're going to build a minaret, we're going to build a dome. But 10 years later, 20 years later, and it's exactly the same. No minaret, no dome. So people start asking the question, where does the money go? But the Sahal and Suhail, they knew that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, when he asked for the land, and when he said to them that I want to build a masjid, they knew Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam was going to deliver on his promise. So they were willing to give it to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam for free, for sadaqah, for charity. But look at Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam's sincerity and ikhlas. He says to them that, no, I want to buy this land from you. Because Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam realized that they were orphans, they were poor, they were yatim, they were in need. And in those days, very common for people to abuse the rights of the orphans. So Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, who grew up, by the way, as an orphan, as a yatim, he knew that how people can abuse orphans, how people can abuse yatims. He said to Sahal and Suhail that, look, I don't want to take this from you for free. even though in the year after you will get so much sadaqah and charity, but I want to buy this from you. And then Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam ordered Hazrat Abu Bakr radhiyallahu anhu to buy this land, this piece of land from Sahal and Suhail, and the price which Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam bought this land for was 10 dinars. And 10 dinars approximately nowadays is around 40 pounds and so on, 40, 50 pounds, but in those days quite expensive. So Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam bought this land from Sahal and Suhail for 10 dinars. Now this land which Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam purchased from Sahal and Suhail, it wasn't already nice and smooth and just requires the foundation. There was actually graves on this land, the graves of the mushrikeen. There was also a lot of date palm trees on this particular land. So therefore Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam ordered the Sahabas and companions to level and knock down the graves of the mushrikeen, and also to cut the date palm trees. Thereafterwards he ordered the Sahabas and the companions to start producing unbaked bricks, not the nice orangish baked colored bricks, but Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam ordered the Sahabas to start producing unbaked bricks. And one Sahabi in particular, Talq bin Ali radiyallahu ta'ala anhu, was mentioned in the hadith of Musnad Ahmad. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam ordered him to make the cement, to make the mortar, the paste which you put on the bricks. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam ordered him to make that. Now the hadith says that Talq bin Ali, he was making the cement, and then he started also making or producing the unbaked bricks. So Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam stopped Talq bin Ali and he said to him that, no, you don't make the unbaked bricks, you stick to mixing the cement and the mortar. Why? Because you are good at that, you're an expert in that. And from this we can understand, as that usul li kulli fannin rijal, that when it comes to, like, say, masjid or building a masjid or anything regarding the masjid and the structure, we should use brothers for that particular thing which they are good at. Somebody who's good at painting, you're not going to tell him to start, okay, you start making the architect of the masjid. Or someone who's good at the drawings and the foundation, you're not going to tell him, oh, you do the plastering and so on. Someone who's, like, for example, good at carpeting, you're not going to tell him that you start, tiling in the bathroom. So someone who's good at something, you tell him to do that. So similarly, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam knew Talq bin Ali, he was good at making the paste, he was good at mixing the cement and the mortar. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam told him that your zimmedari is to just make the cement and the rest of us will produce the unbaked bricks. Now Masjid al-Nabawi sallallahu alaihi wasallam, it's unique in many different ways, but unique, why? Because during Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam's time, it was very, very simple. It was unique for its sadgi. That's like a quality in itself. It was unique for his sadgi and for its simplicity. In those days, the temples, the churches, the synagogues, they were like beautifully decorated and so on. But Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, the masjid which he made was so simple. As I was saying, that the walls, they were made out of unbaked bricks. The pillars which were inside the masjid, they were made from the trunks of the date palm trees. And the roof, there was just full of like leaves and branches. Later on it became, they plastered it with mortar and cement. But during Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam's time, the roof was just like full of like leaves, stuffed leaves and branches. And that's how the roof was. Even to the extent that sometimes whenever it would rain, there would be a leak in the masjid, but Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam would continue, and the Sahabas, they would continue praying salah. Because the main thing wasn't about the actual structure. It was like a place being there where the Muslims and the Sahabas could gather for salah and could gather for prayer. Now in Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam's time, or initially, Masjid al-Nabawi sallallahu alaihi wasallam had 3 doors. So just imagine, because at the very beginning the Qibla was pointed towards Jerusalem, was pointed towards Masjid al-Aqsa. So just say for argument's sake, the Qibla was that way. So there were 3 doors. There was door on the other side, the southern side, known as Babur Rahmah. Then there was another door on the western side known as Babu Jibra'il. And this was a door where Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam would often enter Masjid al-Nabawi sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And then on the eastern side there was another door called Babu Nisa. And this is where the women would enter. At the very beginning, the female sahabiyats, they would also come to the masjid as well. So they would enter from Babu Nisa. But later on, when the Qibla was changed from Masjid al-Aqsa to Baytullah, so the darwaza or the entrance here, that was sealed because there was a total opposite now. So the Qibla was there, it now transferred to this side. So the door which was there, that was now sealed, and then another entrance was made on that particular side. So during Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam's time, there was only 3 doors. Now, in Masjid al-Nabawi sallallahu alaihi wasallam, you had the main, you could say, the Jamaat Khana, but there was also another place, another kind of raised platform where 70 Sahabas, known as the Ashab-e-Suffa, would stay there. And these 70 Sahabas, they were poor, so they didn't have any kind of like families or anyone to go to. They were poor people, poor Sahabas. But what they done is that they dedicated their life, they sacrificed everything for the sake of knowledge, acquiring knowledge. So they left everything, you could say like a madrasa, they left their families and they've gone to the madrasa to study knowledge. So this is what they did, these Sahabas, 70 of them. One of them was Sayyidina Abu Hurairah anhu. So they would stay in Masjid Nabawi sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So in there they would listen to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam's talks, sermons, i.e. the ahadith. They would write that down. They would memorize it. That's why many hadiths we see narrated by the Ashab-e-Suffa, narrated by Abu Hurairah anhu. They would learn the interpretation of the Quran. They would learn memorizing the Holy Quran. Some of them would write the wahi and the verses of the Holy Quran down. So this is what was happening during Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam's time. And as I mentioned before, that the masjid which Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam had, the Masjid al-Nabawi, everything would take place there. You know, the even practicing for wars, that would take place in the Masjid al-Nabawi sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Darul Qudat, i.e. the judge, the Faisla, would also take place in Masjid al-Nabawi sallallahu alaihi wasallam as well. And in some ahadith, like in Tirmidhi, it says that even the punishment, like if somebody like committed adultery, the punishment would even take place in Masjid al-Nabawi sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So what we can say is that Masjid al-Nabawi sallallahu alaihi wasallam was a multi-purpose hall or a multi-purpose center where everything would take place. Not just the 5 daily prayers, obviously that's the main part, not just the ta'aleem and the acquiring of knowledge, but everything took place in Masjid al-Nabawi sallallahu alaihi wasallam. That's why many of the hadiths which we hear, he always talks about the Sahabas being in a gathering with Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Sami'tu, I heard Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam say this. So many of the hadiths which we hear, they've all come from Masjid al-Nabawi sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Even to the extent that, as mentioned in a hadith of Sunan Abu Dawud, that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam has said that when you take an oath or a qasam, so just taking oath and qasam, that's like very, very severe. But then Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said that that person who takes qasam or oath near my pulpit, near my mimbar, then that is even more severe. So these are, and even like another hadith in Sunan Abu Dawud where it says that when people, when they would make contracts about, I've taken this much amount of money from you, or I borrowed this much amount of money, that would also take place in Masjid al-Nabawi sallallahu alaihi wasallam, near the mimbar and the pulpit of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So what we can derive is that Masjid al-Nabawi sallallahu alaihi wasallam was used for everything. Okay, the Sahaba, they didn't have to go anywhere. Okay, everything was in the Masjid Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Mentioned in the hadith that even there was like a bunch of dates in Masjid Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam. There was like a bunch of dates, and whenever the Sahabas would feel hungry, they would take the dates from the bunch and they would start eating. So from this, the ulamas derive 2 rulings. One is like the permissibility of a light or a chandelier, say in a masjid, and number 2, the permissibility of eating in the masjid. So everything, khana, you name it, everything took place in Masjid al-Nabawi sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So that was the role model of a masjid Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam gave to us many, many hundreds and centuries ago. All right, that is the unique role model. Okay, everything took place. You know, the tarbiyah of Sahabas took place in Masjid Nabawi sallallahu alaihi wasallam. People gathered, not just for namaz, for other social things as well. They gathered in Masjid Nabawi sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Ta'aleem, ta'allum, that all took place in Masjid Nabawi sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Now, after Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, during his time, the masjid was built twice, or it was renovated twice. One was the very first time, and the second time in 7th Hijri, after the Battle of Khaybar. What happened was that many Muslims, alhamdulillah, at that time had converted to Islam, so obviously the masjid became very small. So Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam approached an Ansari person who lived next to the masjid, and approached him, and Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said to him that, "O Ansari, give me your land in exchange for a palace in Jannah and paradise." Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said to him that you give us or donate your land for sadaqah and charity, and the reward and the thawab is that you will get a palace in Jannah and paradise. Now this Ansari person, he was unable to donate the land because he was poor, so he couldn't give this land for free to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So Hazrat Uthman radiallahu anhu heard about this, so he then went and he bought this land from this Ansari Sahabi, and then he came to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam and he said to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam that, "O Rasulullah, I have bought this land and I am giving it to you in exchange for a palace in Jannah and paradise." So Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam accepted this gift and this sadaqah of Hazrat Uthman radiallahu anhu, and then the masjid was increased, the capacity was widened onto this new piece of land. Now after Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam passed away, the masjid was during Hazrat Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu's time, it wasn't expanded, but more or less the masjid remained the same. The only thing Hazrat Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu did was that the pillars which were inside the masjid, they were getting old. So what Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu did was that he took the pillars and then the exact same date palm trees, the trunks of it, he bought it and he put that as the new pillar. During Hazrat Umar radiallahu anhu's time, the masjid was slightly widened because at that time many more Muslims were converting. Then during Hazrat Uthman radiallahu anhu's time, you have the next kind of changing or renovation of Masjid Nabawi sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and it's mentioned that Hazrat Uthman radiallahu anhu, people started complaining that, oh, it's too squashed here, too many people come for Jummah, there's no space here. So Hazrat Uthman radiallahu anhu, he then intended to do shaheed, so he actually did shaheed of the entire building, and then he renovated that building again. Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar. So as I was saying that during Sayyidina Uthman radiallahu anhu's time, he actually did shaheed, like actually demolished the existing masjid, and then he built a new one on it. And when he built this new one, he actually, the walls, instead of like being made from unbaked bricks, it was now made with like nice beautiful stones. It was like more baked bricks. And many of the people, they started complaining to Hazrat Uthman radiallahu anhu that, "Oh Uthman, or Amirul Mu'mineen, you're doing something which the Sahabas or which the Khulafa before you didn't do, something which Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam didn't do." So Hazrat Uthman radiallahu anhu, he said to them, and this is what the ulamas and the jurists have said, that because at that time many people, they were beautifying their homes meaning that they were building nice homes. So Hazrat Uthman radiallahu anhu was trying to say is that, look, when people are beautifying their homes, making it nice and beautiful with nice fancy stones, then the house of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the ghar of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the home of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that is more worthy and more mustahik of beautifying. Now it shouldn't then lead to an objection where some jurists and fuqaha have said that inside the masjid to like beautify and to decorate it too much is considered to be a form of israf. What Hazrat Uthman radiallahu anhu did was that the inside of the masjid remained simple. It wasn't like too fancy inside. But what Hazrat Uthman ibn Anhu did was that, you know, the actual bunyad of the masjid, he made that strong. So he used nice, like beautiful stones outside the masjid, because obviously the more stronger stones, the baked bricks he used, the structure remains there for a very, very long time, rather than if you were to use unbaked bricks. But the inside of the masjid, that remained still the same as it was during Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam's time. So what we can gather, and what the fuqaha and the jurists have said, that to actually make the building from outside nice and strong, there's nothing wrong with that. But when will it be considered israf to a certain extent, or wasteful of money, is that inside, if you were to make it too tacky, too kind of fancy, too kind of lavish. Because remember, the whole point of coming to the masjid is to remember Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You know, if people want to go and marvel at a particular building or something, they'll probably go to a wedding hall and marvel at the lights there. They come to the masjid to remember Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. If they come to the masjid and they're marveling at the chandeliers, they're marveling at the beautiful decorations, then what's the difference between them going to a wedding hall, say for example, or coming to the masjid? So inside should be simple as possible, but outside to make it strong, to beautify the outside, there's nothing wrong with that. And obviously, when you look at it, it's a kind of coincidence that obviously we're also planning to, for our masjid, for our khanqah as well. So obviously what we can learn from this particular story and this aspect of how Masjid al-Nabawi sallallahu alaihi wasallam was raised and how the foundation was done, is that the key thing was that all the Sahabas participated in the building of this masjid. Even Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam as well, I mentioned this before, he actually would take the stones, he was actually producing the unbaked bricks. So everyone participated in the building of Masjid al-Nabawi sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and when he was made, when he was raised, then the masjid was used for everything. The Sahaba, they spent the entire day there in various things, either learning, either helping Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And these are the two things which we should remember for our own khanqah. Number one is that we should try to help, you know, whether financially, whether in terms of physically, you know, moving the things or painting and so on and so forth. And number two, which is very, very important, is to go there all the time. It shouldn't be what we call like a white elephant. White elephant meaning like we just like the buildings there, that's it, and there's only one person going there for namaz. It shouldn't be like that. We should be all the time used, you know, from Fajr all the way till Isha. Whenever we have time, we should be there, either doing something, whether it's for dhikr or for any other reasons or activities. We should make the building abad. That's the main important thing, because we see many people or many masajids, big masajids, but hardly anyone using the facility. Now you should always remember that these buildings or these masajids, they are all a blessing from Allah, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will ask us in the hereafter. He will ask us that, okay, we gave you this big masjid which had the capacity of doing this activity, doing that particular function, but what did you do for the Muslim community? So we'll be asked regarding the hereafter. So another point is that we should use the building properly, and we should always be there for our namazis, for any dhikr, for any activity. We should always be there. We should actually treat that as our second home, always be there. And that's one of the reasons why we did actually look for a khanqah nearby, is so that we can be there. If it was, say, somewhere like in Aston or somewhere, then it would have been difficult for us to, you know, go there for every namaz or for every time. But one of the purposes of having it nearby is so that all the brothers could go and participate. May Allah gives the tawfiq to act. One's been said, wa akhir da'wana.